At Grandma's funeral, I was told to sit in the back. My mom looked me in the eye and said, "You don't belong up front, you never did." I was stunned. The words hit me like a slap across the face, especially in front of all the relatives and family friends who had come to pay their respects. I had barely sat down in the uncomfortable wooden pew when the lawyer stood up and said, "There's a private matter regarding the will. I'll need to speak with her, alone." Every head in the church turned to look at me. My sister Caroline rolled her eyes and whispered something to Mom that made her frown even deeper. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment as I realized he was pointing directly at me. The failed daughter. The disappointment. The one who apparently didn't even deserve to sit with her own family at her grandmother's funeral. But something in the lawyer's tone made my stomach flutter with nervousness. Why would he need to speak with me alone? What could Grandma possibly have left for the granddaughter who never seemed to do anything right? All my life, I was the failed daughter. Caroline, my older sister, was the golden child. Straight A's, scholarships, a perfect wedding that cost my parents $30,000. Me? I once got a B- in mathematics and Mom cried like someone had died. Dad didn't even look up from his phone when I tried to explain that I'd actually improved from a C+. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my childhood. Caroline was student council president, homecoming queen, and valedictorian. She went to Stanford on a full scholarship and married a doctor. I went to community college and worked part-time at a bookstore. When Caroline announced her engagement, Mom threw her a party with 50 guests. When I graduated with my associate's degree, they forgot to come to the ceremony. I sat in the auditorium afterward, watching other families take photos and celebrate, feeling completely invisible. That's when I knew I would always be the consolation prize in my parents' eyes. The daughter they got stuck with instead of the one they actually wanted. After the funeral, I went to Grandma's house one last time. The small blue cottage felt so quiet without her humming in the kitchen or calling out for me to help her reach something from the high shelf. Tucked in her knitting basket was a little leather notebook I'd never seen before. Inside were memories of me written in her shaky handwriting. "Lena brought soup today. Stayed with me till sunset. Lena fixed my leaky faucet without being asked. Lena reads to me every Tuesday." My chest tightened as I flipped through page after page of moments I'd forgotten but she'd treasured. No one else ever wrote down stuff like that about me. Mom kept a scrapbook of Caroline's achievements. Newspaper clippings, awards, photos from fancy events. But here was evidence that someone had been paying attention to my quiet acts of kindness. Someone had noticed that I cared. I held the notebook against my chest and cried right there in her empty living room, surrounded by the furniture I'd helped her pick out and the plants I'd watered every week for 3 years. When I turned 16, I baked my own cake. No one remembered it was my birthday until I mentioned it at dinner, and even then, Mom just looked flustered and said she'd been busy planning Caroline's college applications. That same week, Caroline got a surprise trip to Paris for winning a dance competition. I remember asking Mom why she forgot mine. She said, "Well, maybe if you gave me something to be proud of, I'd remember." The words stung because I knew she meant them. I wasn't the daughter who brought home trophies or honor roll certificates. I was the one who remembered to take out the trash without being asked and helped elderly Mrs. Patterson next door with her groceries. But those things didn't seem to count in my family's scorecard. Caroline got the praise and the parties and the photo albums filled with achievements. I got forgotten birthdays and disappointed sighs and the constant feeling that I was taking up space that belonged to someone more deserving. That night, I ate my homemade cake alone in my room while Caroline FaceTimed her friends about her upcoming trip to France. At Caroline's wedding, I wasn't a bridesmaid. I wasn't even invited properly. Mom just assumed I'd show up because I lived at home. I ended up helping serve drinks because one of the waiters quit at the last minute. A guest thought I was staff and handed me his empty champagne glass without a word. When I told Caroline about it later, she said, "Well, at least you're useful for once." Her bridesmaids were all her sorority sisters from Stanford, perfectly polished girls who spoke in that confident way that came from never doubting they belonged wherever they were. I spent the reception in my simple black dress, refilling water glasses and clearing plates while my sister danced with her new husband. The photographer took hundreds of pictures, but I'm not in any of them. Not even the family shots. When someone asked where I was, Mom said, "Oh, Lena's helping out. She's good at that sort of thing." Like serving drinks at my own sister's wedding was some kind of special talent instead of just another reminder that I didn't quite fit into my own family's most important moments. The lawyer called me 2 days after the funeral. His name was Marcus Wellington, and he had that formal way of speaking that made everything sound important. He said, "Your grandmother left something behind, for your eyes only." My stomach dropped. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew it couldn't be anything valuable. Caroline was already making plans for what she'd do with Grandma's beach house, and Mom had been sorting through jewelry she assumed would be divided between her and Caroline. Nobody had mentioned me getting anything except maybe some books or kitchen utensils. I agreed to meet him at his office the next morning, and I spent the night wondering what Grandma could have possibly left me. Maybe a quilt she'd made or her recipe collection. Something sentimental but not particularly valuable, the kind of thing families give to the daughter who doesn't really matter. I tried not to get my hopes up, but I couldn't stop thinking about that leather notebook and all those memories she'd written down. Maybe there was more to this than anyone realized. He handed me an envelope with my name written in Grandma's careful handwriting. "My dear Lena," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm already gone. You were the only one who ever truly saw me." I started crying right there in his office, not caring that this stranger was watching me fall apart. The letter continued, "While your mother and sister were busy with their own lives, you were the one who noticed when I was lonely. You were the one who remembered that I hated peach yogurt but loved the strawberry kind. You were the one who sat with me through my doctor's appointments and held my hand when I was scared." I had to stop reading because the tears were making the words blurry. Marcus handed me a box of tissues and waited patiently while I composed myself. "She talks about you quite a bit in her final documents," he said gently. "She was very specific about wanting you to know how much your kindness meant to her." I wiped my eyes and continued reading, my heart pounding as I realized this wasn't just a goodbye letter. There was something else coming, something that would change everything. The lawyer showed me a bank statement. I blinked hard, thinking I was seeing things. $850,000. "She left this to you," he said. "And the house. But she didn't want the family to know. Not yet." I stared at the numbers, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. $850,000. More money than I'd ever imagined having. More money than my parents had ever had. The house was worth another $200,000 at least. I was suddenly a millionaire, and nobody in my family knew. "She was very clear about the timing," Marcus explained. "She wanted you to have 30 days to decide how to handle this information. She knew your family would have opinions." I laughed, but it came out more like a sob. Opinions was putting it mildly. They'd be furious. They'd claim I'd manipulated her or that she wasn't in her right mind. They'd never believe that the failed daughter had inherited everything while the golden child got nothing. If you're enjoying this story of justice and family secrets, please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, because trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. "What about Caroline?" I asked. "What about my parents?" Marcus smiled sadly. "Read the rest of the letter." That night, Mom was sipping wine and talking about how close she and Grandma were. She said, "I basically kept her alive for 10 years. I don't know what she would have done without me." I nearly laughed out loud. I was the one doing her grocery runs every Tuesday. I was the one who knew she hated peach yogurt but loved strawberry. I was the one who drove her to physical therapy appointments and sat in waiting rooms for hours. I was the one who called her every single day to make sure she was okay. Mom visited maybe once a month, and usually only when she needed something. Caroline came by even less frequently, always rushing off to some important commitment. But here was Mom, rewriting history to make herself the devoted daughter who'd sacrificed everything for her aging mother. "I'm just glad she's at peace now," Mom continued, dabbing her eyes with a napkin. "She always said I was the one who understood her best." I excused myself before I said something I'd regret. In my room, I read Grandma's letter again, focusing on the part where she wrote about feeling forgotten by everyone except me. Caroline was furious she didn't get the beach house. "It's supposed to go to me," she said during a family dinner 3 days after the funeral. "I have kids, a husband, Lena doesn't even have a job." I stood in the kitchen listening through the wall, my hands shaking as I loaded the dishwasher. They were talking about me like I wasn't even there, like I was some kind of charity case who didn't deserve nice things. "I mean, what's she going to do with a beach house?" Caroline continued. "She doesn't even have friends to invite." "At least I'd actually use it." Dad murmured something about fairness, but Mom quickly shut him down. "Caroline's right. She has a family to think about. That house would be perfect for the kids' summer vacations." I wanted to march in there and tell them that I'd been the one cleaning that beach house for Grandma every month, that I'd been the one making sure the pipes didn't freeze in winter and the garden didn't die in summer. But I held my tongue. Let them plan their imaginary inheritance. They were in for a surprise. In Grandma's house, I found a drawer full of unopened letters she'd written to Mom over the years. Asking for help. Begging for someone to check on her. All ignored. One was from just a year ago: "I haven't seen you in 6 months. Please come. I'm lonely." The letter was sealed and stamped but never sent. I found dozens of them, letters pouring out her heart to a daughter who was too busy to listen. "I fell in the garden today and couldn't get up for 20 minutes. I thought about calling you, but I know you're busy with Caroline's family." Another one: "The doctor says I need someone to drive me to appointments. I don't want to be a burden." Reading them broke my heart because I knew how proud Grandma was, how much it must have cost her to write these desperate pleas for attention. And I knew Mom would have just been annoyed if she'd received them. She would have sighed and complained about Grandma being needy and dramatic. I carefully put all the letters back in the drawer. They were evidence of something I'd always known but never had proof of: I was the only one who truly cared. In another envelope, I found a letter from Grandma dated on my 10th birthday. She'd written it but never given it to me. "You shine in quiet ways, Lena. That's rare. That's strength." The letter went on to describe how I'd helped her plant flowers in her garden that day, how patient I'd been when she moved slowly, how I'd noticed she was tired and suggested we take a break. "Other children your age would have been bored or complained, but you stayed with me all afternoon. You asked questions about each flower and really listened to my answers. You have a gift for making people feel seen." I held the letter to my chest like it was oxygen. All those years of feeling invisible, of being the forgotten daughter, and here was proof that someone had been watching. Someone had noticed my kindness and appreciated it. I wondered why she'd never given me this letter, why she'd kept it hidden in her drawer for all these years. Maybe she'd been saving it for a moment when I really needed to hear it. Maybe she'd somehow known that I'd find it when I needed it most. I met Marcus again the next week. I said, "When the family finds out, they'll try to take everything. They'll say I manipulated her or that she wasn't thinking clearly." He nodded knowingly. "Let's give them just enough rope to hang themselves." We set a date for the official reading, exactly 30 days after the funeral, just as Grandma had requested. In the meantime, I was supposed to act completely normal, to let them continue planning what they'd do with their assumed inheritance. Marcus explained that Grandma had been very specific about this timing. She wanted them to reveal their true feelings about me before they knew about the will. She wanted them to show their colors when they thought it didn't matter. "She was quite clever, your grandmother," Marcus said with a slight smile. "She knew exactly what kind of people she was dealing with." I thought about all the conversations I'd overheard in the past week, all the casual cruelty and dismissive comments. Grandma had predicted it all. She'd known they'd show their worst selves when they thought I couldn't hurt them. But she'd made sure I'd have the last word. Caroline called me out of nowhere the following Tuesday. Her husband Brad had lost his job, something about corporate downsizing that I didn't pretend to understand. "Hey, so I have a favor to ask," she said in that fake sweet voice she used when she wanted something. "Do you think you could help cover a few things? Just $5,000? You're good with small jobs, right? $5,000. More money than I'd ever had at one time in my life, and she was asking for it like it was pocket change. Like because I worked at a bookstore and lived at home, I must have thousands of dollars just lying around. "I know it's a lot," she continued, "but Brad's unemployment won't kick in for another month, and we have the mortgage and the kids' school fees." I told her I'd think about it, mainly because I was curious to see how far she'd push. "I mean, I know you don't have much, but maybe you could ask Mom and Dad? Or take out a loan? I'd pay you back, obviously." Obviously. Just like she'd obviously paid me back for her share of Mom's birthday present last year, or the gas money I'd lent her for her anniversary trip. At a family game night the next weekend, they made a birthday board with everyone's photos and memories from the past year. Mom had printed out pictures from Caroline's birthday party, Dad's retirement celebration, and Caroline's kids' birthdays. Mine wasn't there. When I asked about it, Mom looked confused for a moment before saying, "Oh. I thought we agreed your birthdays were complicated." Complicated. Like my existence was some kind of difficult puzzle they'd rather not solve. I watched Caroline's kids stick gold stars next to their favorite photos, chattering excitedly about their birthday parties and presents. I remembered being their age and feeling that same excitement about birthdays, before I learned that mine didn't matter to anyone. "We could add yours next year," Mom offered weakly, but we both knew she wouldn't remember. Caroline was already planning her next birthday party, talking about renting out the country club and hiring a professional photographer. I excused myself to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face, reminding myself that in 2 weeks, none of this would matter anymore. The next day, Marcus showed up at our house with a sealed envelope. "We'll be reading the full will next Thursday," he announced to the family gathered in the living room. Everyone should be there. The room went completely silent. Mom set down her coffee cup with shaking hands. Caroline's face went pale. Dad looked confused, like he couldn't figure out why a lawyer would need to read a will when they'd already been planning how to divide everything. "Is there some kind of problem?" Mom asked in a tight voice. "This is just standard procedure," Marcus replied smoothly. Mrs. Patterson was very specific about wanting the entire family present for the reading. I tried to keep my expression neutral, but inside I was buzzing with anticipation. This was it. The moment Grandma had been planning for. The moment when everyone would finally understand exactly what kind of person I was and exactly what kind of people they were. Caroline kept glancing at me suspiciously, like she was trying to figure out if I knew something she didn't. Mom started pacing around the kitchen, muttering about lawyers and complications and how Grandma had always been dramatic. The next morning, I caught Caroline going through my room. She'd found the leather notebook but not the letter from Marcus or the bank documents I'd hidden in my closet. She was flipping through Grandma's handwritten memories when I appeared in the doorway. She jumped like she'd been caught stealing. "I was just cleaning," she said, clutching the notebook to her chest. I didn't say a word. I just smiled and held out my hand. She reluctantly gave me the notebook, her face red with embarrassment. "There's nothing interesting in there anyway," she muttered. "Just boring stuff about groceries and doctor appointments." But I could see in her eyes that she'd read enough to understand that Grandma had been paying attention to me in ways Caroline had never realized. She'd seen the evidence of my constant presence in Grandma's life, all those small acts of kindness that had meant everything to a lonely old woman. "Why did she write all this stuff down?" Caroline asked, genuinely confused. I just shrugged and put the notebook in my dresser drawer. Some things didn't need to be explained. That evening, Mom pulled me aside. "Did you steal something from your grandmother?" Her eyes were cold and suspicious. "You were always jealous of Caroline. Did you take something that doesn't belong to you?" I stared at her, amazed that she could actually believe I was capable of theft. After all the years of watching me be the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who never caused trouble or asked for anything, she was ready to believe I'd suddenly turned into a criminal. "I didn't steal anything," I said quietly. "Everything I have, she gave me freely." Mom's eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" But I just turned and walked away. There was no point in arguing with her. In less than a week, she'd understand exactly what I meant, and she'd have to live with the knowledge that she'd accused her own daughter of theft when all I'd done was love my grandmother. I went to my room and locked the door, counting down the hours until Thursday. The waiting was almost unbearable, but I knew it would be worth it. On Wednesday, they tried to call Marcus to cancel the reading. Caroline convinced Mom that I was unstable and might do something dramatic. She'd somehow gotten it into her head that I was planning to contest the will or cause some kind of scene. Marcus called me that afternoon, chuckling. "They're quite worried about you," he said. I told them that's not how wills work. The reading will proceed as scheduled. I spent that evening writing down everything I wanted to say when the time came. All the hurt and disappointment and years of being overlooked. All the love I'd had for Grandma and the gratitude I felt for being seen by someone who mattered. I wanted to be ready for whatever happened next, whether they exploded in anger or broke down in tears or tried to claim I'd manipulated a dying woman. I practiced my speech in the mirror, trying to keep my voice steady. Tomorrow, after 25 years of being the failed daughter, I would finally have my moment. And Grandma would be there with me in spirit, making sure I wasn't alone. We sat in Marcus's conference room the next morning. Coffee and tension filled the air. Caroline kept smirking every time she looked at me, probably imagining how disappointed I'd be when I got nothing but some old jewelry. Mom looked like she was waiting for applause, already planning how she'd graciously accept the house and the money and the praise for being such a devoted daughter. Dad just looked tired, like he wanted to get this over with so he could go back to his golf game. Marcus started reading the small bequests first, a set of china to Mom, some books to Dad, a jewelry box to Caroline. Standard stuff that made everyone nod approvingly. Then he paused and looked directly at me. "And now we come to the main provisions of the will," he said in his formal lawyer voice. The room went quiet except for the sound of Caroline's pen clicking as she took notes. Mom straightened up in her chair, probably preparing her gracious acceptance speech. None of them noticed that Marcus was looking at me with something that might have been a smile. Then he read the words that changed everything. "To my granddaughter Lena, the one you all called a failure. The only one who never failed me." My heart stopped. Everyone turned to look at me with expressions ranging from confusion to shock. Caroline's pen stopped clicking. Mom's mouth fell open. Dad leaned forward like he hadn't heard correctly. Marcus continued reading in his calm, professional voice. "While my daughter and older granddaughter were busy with their own lives, Lena was the one who saw me. She was the one who remembered that I was still a person with feelings and fears and dreams." The words hung in the air like smoke. I could feel my family's eyes on me, could sense their growing panic as they began to understand that this will reading wasn't going the way they'd expected. She was the one who drove me to doctor's appointments and held my hand when I was scared. She was the one who called me every day and brought me soup when I was sick. She was the one who loved me not for what I could give her, but for who I was. Marcus turned the page and continued. "Therefore, I leave my house, my beach property, and all my savings accounts to Lena." Mom gasped like she'd been slapped. Caroline whispered, "That can't be right." But Marcus kept reading, his voice steady and sure. "The house on Maple Street where I lived for 40 years. The beach cottage where I spent my happiest summers. The savings accounts that total $850,000. All of it goes to the granddaughter who earned it through love, not expectation." The room was completely silent now except for the sound of Mom's sharp breathing and Caroline's chair creaking as she shifted in disbelief. $850,000. The number hung in the air like a bomb that had just exploded. I tried to keep my expression neutral, but inside I was shaking. This was really happening. Grandma had kept her word. She'd made sure the person who loved her most would be taken care of, and she'd made sure everyone else would know exactly why they'd been left out. And lastly, Marcus said, there's a trust fund for Lena's future children or education. Another $200,000, to be managed by the executor until she needs it. Caroline stood up so fast her chair fell over. She doesn't even have kids, she shouted. She doesn't even have a boyfriend. Why would she need a trust fund? Marcus looked at her with the patient expression of someone who'd dealt with many angry families. Perhaps because she was too busy taking care of your grandmother to focus on her own life, he said quietly. The words hit Caroline like a physical blow. She sat back down, her face red and her hands shaking. Mom was crying now, not the gentle tears of grief but the angry tears of someone who'd been denied something she thought was hers. This isn't fair, she whispered. I'm her daughter. I should have gotten the house. But fairness had nothing to do with it. This was about love and attention and showing up when it mattered. This was about being the person who cared when caring was hard and thankless and unnoticed. Marcus saved the best for last. He pulled out a final letter and began reading Grandma's words aloud. Kindness doesn't shout. It endures. I raised a granddaughter who gave quietly and asked for nothing. Now I give her everything she deserves and more. His voice softened as he continued, Lena, you were the light in my final years. You were the one who made me feel like I mattered. You were the one who saw me as more than just an obligation or a burden. You loved me for who I was, not what I could give you. The tears were flowing freely down my face now, but I didn't care. These were Grandma's words, her final gift to me. Her final acknowledgement that I hadn't been invisible after all. To my daughter and older granddaughter, I leave this lesson: love is not about what you can get from someone. It's about what you're willing to give. Lena understood that. I hope someday you will too. The room was absolutely silent. Even Caroline had stopped crying. They were all staring at me like they were seeing me for the first time, and maybe they were. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I stood up slowly, grabbed my coat from the back of my chair, and walked toward the door. Lena, wait, Mom called out, but I didn't turn around. I could hear Caroline asking Marcus if there was some way to contest the will, if there was some legal loophole that would let them claim I'd manipulated Grandma. But I knew there wasn't. Grandma had been sharp until the end, and she'd made her choices with full knowledge of what they meant. As I reached the door, I turned back one last time. For what it's worth, I said quietly, I would have shared everything with you. If you'd ever treated me like family, if you'd ever shown me even a fraction of the love you showed Caroline, I would have made sure you were taken care of. But you didn't. You called me the failed daughter for 25 years, and now you know what Grandma thought of that. I walked out of that office and into the brightest sunshine I'd ever seen. They'd called me the failed daughter, but Grandma knew the truth. And now, finally, so did everyone else. Now I am curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been the forgotten child in your family? Comment below and let me know your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this story of justice and vindication, please subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss stories like this one. There are more incredible tales of family drama, revenge, and getting the last word coming your way. Thank you for watching.